Hello, welcome back to everyone listening to our channel, American Ultra Stock. Braden and I today bringing to you guys a comeback of a segment that we had a while ago. We see that we have a lot of people new in the community. We appreciate you guys being here. We'd just like to take this moment to thank you guys and make sure to ask the guys that haven't subscribed yet, please make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a like as well, comment. But as you see on Braden's background, it's the US against Japan. We're going to do the head-to-head series where we compare the prospects and, we're just going to go with factually the best lineup. Well, factually on our opinion, but that's the fact of the best 11 on each country and go player by player to decide which one is the best. We've done this in the past against powerhouses, but now I think this is a really good comparison. In my opinion, Japan's a little bit ahead of us, but we're in the same bracket of trying to break into that European and South American, the way they have always been leading the soccer stage. So just straight to the point, this is a very interesting comparison, Braden. Japan right now, they have fielded Suzuki as their starting goalkeeper, and he has ties to the US. Comparing him to Matt Turner, who honestly, that position is up for grabs, but I put Turner here since he's the most experienced. Who would you take, especially considering to the 26th cycle?
This is probably the most interesting position just because Zion Suzuki could have been a USMNT player. He never really showed true desire to play for us just because his background is mainly Japanese, but he does have American ties. I think he was born in the US. And honestly, I'm very gutted that we ended up missing out on him because I think in our current pool, he would easily be in our roster, and I think he would be our number 2. But for this comparison right now, I am still going to take Matt Turner just because of the experience. He's playing in a better league. He is not playing great, but the level from the Premier League, the step up from the Belgian Pro League is such a huge gap, honestly. And the fact that Zion Suzuki has barely even cemented himself as the Japan starter, I don't even know if he completely has yet. I know he's in the roster, but I don't think he's cemented himself as their starter yet. He's still too young for me to pick him over Turner just for now. But honestly, in 2026, I think he could be ahead of Turner.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'll take Suzuki just for the fact of 26. If it was today, I'll probably still take Suzuki. I'm tired of watching Matt Turner. Don't hate on the guy. Such a likable person. And I think that Suzuki hasn't cemented himself as a starter yet, but he definitely will by then. I think the goalkeeping position has always been an issue for Japan. Always, always. And I think that, honestly, looking at his competition, he's going to be clear ahead in their starter by then, in my opinion at least. Gonda is a good goalkeeper, but he's old already. And yeah, he is the best goalkeeper they've had since Kawashima, who was also starting in the Belgian Pro League at some point. So it's a nice connection there. Now going on to the right back position, Sugawara or Dest. I'm the biggest Serginho Dest fan. But Braden, who would you field out if you had to pick one for the best 11?
Another pretty close one, I would say. But I am still going to pick Dest to make it 2-0. I don't know if that's biased or not, but I do think that the talent he's shown in the past, especially his skill set on the ball, is one of the best for fullbacks in the world, honestly. It's just a shame that he defends at a 6-year-old level. But yeah, his skill set is unmatched, and when he plays for the US, usually he kicks it off an extra gear. Recently, he's had a little bit of disciplinary issues with the 2 red cards last year, especially the one unforgivable one against Trinidad and Tobago. But I'm not going to judge him too harshly for that for now. I think he's still a better player than Sugawara. I think this is a position that Japan's lacking in a little bit, probably one of the weakest in their lineup for sure. So I'm still going to pick Dest.
Yeah, I'll pick Dest too. Sometimes they have fielded Tomiyasu there, but obviously they like to keep him as a center back. I would pick Dest too, even if it was Tomiyasu, Sugawara, or whoever you say. I'm picking Dest, especially for national team performance. And based on the 2 red cards, I'll say that one of them gives him a lot of props. The one against Mexico, he gets a star, a stock up for that. But going on to the next position, this is a good comparison. I picked Ko Itakura, the Mönchengladbach player, and Richards, who I think is a starter for us if you were to field the best 11, even though the center back position, we are so thin back there. If you don't agree with who I picked to start as well, more than welcome to give a shout to any other players, Braden. But between Ko Itakura and our center backs, the one that I picked here, Richards, who would you go for?
I do think Richards is still our best center back, even though he has been playing as CDM for Crystal Palace, and he did actually get benched for the 2 games against Trinidad and Tobago, which I think clearly was a mistake, judging by the performances of our center backs, especially in that second leg. So I do think he will be back in the starting lineup for our next camp. It is nice to see that Greg actually benched a player due to performances, because Richards was very poor against Germany in particular. But I think he is still our best center back despite all of his flaws this season. But I'm going to pick Ko Itakura, the former Manchester City product. I think is a very underrated player. He's been linked to a bunch of big clubs for a recent move. Gladbach's defense isn't great overall, but I do think they have players that just maybe don't fit together. Scally, we've seen, has been in and out of that defense, playing next to Itakura actually now in the 3-back system. And I think Itakura is probably their best center back at Gladbach, and a very underrated player. So I'm going to actually take him over Chris Richards.
Yeah, I'll have to agree. Honestly, I agree with you. I think I commend Greg for giving a little bit of a consequence if you have poor showings for the national team. But if we were playing Brazil tomorrow, I'm pretty sure Richards would start. But if I had the choice, I'll put Itakura there too. I think that he's such a good player, so fast as well, really good at recovering. And I think I'll feel more safe with him at the back. Now, going to the other option, this is a big name for Japan, Tomiyasu, but for the national team, it's very peculiar. He hasn't really cemented himself as a starter, even when they play the big countries. Tomiyasu is now really an unreplaceable player there. He's not an undeniable starter. At the World Cup, we've seen as well. He can be benched, but I picked him since he's a big name, and lately he has been playing well in their 4-1 win against Germany. This was their center back pairing, so I'm going with him. And I'm putting him against Reem here. Who do you take? I think this is an interesting one.
Honestly, I don't think this is that close, despite the fact that Reem has been one of the solidified starters for Fulham in the last couple of years. Obviously, the club captain usually when he plays, because Tom Kearney has kind of fallen out of their team since the promotion back to the Premier League. And yeah, I don't think he's on Tomiyasu's level, to be honest. I think Tomiyasu is one of the most underrated players in the Prem. I think we're kind of seeing a theme here. So many of these Japanese players are so underrated just because maybe it's due to the country they're from. Maybe it's due to other reasons, the leagues they're playing in or whatever. But I think he's so versatile. He can play anywhere across the back line. He could be at right back, and I think if we put him in right back for this 11, he'd beat out Dest, honestly. And I think he's far and away the best center back in this combined pool between Japanese or American players. Doesn't matter who you put him up against, even against Richards, I think he'd win out. I think he'd beat Itakura as well, his teammate and partner at the back for Japan. So I think this is the easiest pick I've had so far, honestly.
Yeah, I'll go with Tomiyasu as well. I think the versatility really plays a part here. But I'm not that big of a fan of him, honestly. I don't think that Tomiyasu, for Japan, he has let them down a few times. For country, but I think he's such a good player too. He's undeniably has to be in the starting of this combined best 11. Now going on to the left back position, I put Ito, Hiroki Ito. I think he's a really good young left back against Jedi. Who would you start?
I think this one, I said the last one was the easiest, but this one's even easier for me. Jedi has been one of the best left backs in the world this season. I think he's contending for a team of the season spot in the Premier League, which is unheard of for an American in such a talented league. Probably the best in the world, I think it's fair to say. And Hiroki Ito, I just don't think he's anywhere near the level. Again, the fullbacks seem to be a bit of a weakness for Japan. And honestly, I think they're one of the weakest positions in general in football. Just as a generality, no one really wants to play there. It's kind of the unwanted position. But Jedi has really made it his own. I think he's been in the top 3 for best American players this season. Pulisic's up there, McKennie's up there, but his performances this season have been very, very impressive. So I think he has to win this one.
Yeah, this one's an easy pick. Jedi for sure. Jedi, I would honestly pick Jedi over many left backs in the world, really, in fact. And yeah, it's a nice one for the US. It's an easy pick. Now, going on to the defensive midfield position, I know he's been injured, but I put Adams here because we're going with what is factually, based on our opinions, the best 11 that we can have. Put him against Wataru Endo, who is at Liverpool now. Who would you pick? Keep in mind, Wataru Endo is already 30 years old. Some people, I don't know how they don't know how old these players are, but he's already 30. He is a Liverpool, but it's a good comparison right here. Who would you pick if you were to field one of them to the best 11?
I think Wataru Endo is one of the players who flies under the radar a lot because, like you said, no one really knows how old he is. Signed from Stuttgart and as kind of a backup replacement, third choice option when they missed out on Romeo Lavia and Moise Caicedo in the summer. And honestly, it might have been an upgrade on both of them based on the performances this season. I think he's been a very underrated part of the Liverpool team. By no means a star or anything, just a quality squad player for them. Seems pretty reliable for Japan as well. I am still going to pick Tyler Adams because I think at his best, he's at a higher level. I think he'd do better if, for example, they were both put in a mid-table club. I think he'd win the starting job from Endo. They probably both play together, but we saw last season with Leeds before he got injured how good he was, one of the best tacklers in the entire league. And if you want a true destroyer at the six, which I think with the attacking and further midfield talent we have in this combined pool, I think a destroyer is very valuable, especially for the USMNT as well. We saw the problems we had without Tyler Adams, especially against Germany. They were just running circles around our midfield. So I'm going to pick Tyler Adams because he's so crucial to our team and our captain as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Adams is so vital against Germany. You could see that on the edge of our box, they would do whatever they wanted. If you put Adams there, that wouldn't have been the case. But I'm going to disagree. I'm going to have to go with Endo. I think he's a really good player. I think this is a really tough one for me, one of the toughest ones in this list, because I feel like both players are really good. I think that Adams, at the height of his powers, I'm not going to pick the injured Adams or when he was a little bit off form at Leeds. I'll give him a little bit of a pass there. The whole club was a mess. But at the height of his powers, at his best ever version, I still think that Endo's best version would overtake him. But two really good players. The toughest one for me so far in this list, but I'll have to go with Endo. I think he's been consistently so good on the ball. He's really good in the transition, which I think is an area of Adams' game that could improve a little bit. And the physicality, even for a 30-year-old, it is insane, really. Now, next, Japan has always been rotating who they're going to pick. I'm going to put Tanaka here. Tanaka, I think he's a really good player, a little bit younger than Morita, who plays in Portugal. Against McKinney, this is an easy one for me, but Braden, who would you take?
Another one of the weaker positions for Japan, and it happens to be probably our strongest, with Yunus Musa could definitely be an option here as well. So this is a no-brainer. I don't think we need to spend too much time on this one particularly. McKennie, like I said, he's been one of the best Americans in the world this season, playing for Juve, one of Juve's best players as well. What a rejuvenation. We've spoke on it so many times in recent videos, how incredible his comeback is, coming from a very poor season at Leeds last year. But yeah, it's a no-brainer for me. McKennie, I would take him over almost any player in this pool, regardless of position.
Yeah, I would go with McKinney as well. But I will say Tanaka's a really good player, but we are clear on this one. McKinney has to start. Now, going forward, as we said, Japan is really stacked, but we'll go with a winger, then a 10, another winger. So putting on Takefusa Kubo against Pulisic, Braden, who would you take on your starting 11?
I think the front three or front four, including the 10, is very versatile, especially more for Japan. Kubo can play at the 10. He can play on either wing. And I think he's been one of the unsung heroes of La Liga this season. He's been so good. One of the best players in the league, I think, which is a complete surprise. We saw how good he was at youth level. And just kind of like Martin Odegaard, he's one of the players who actually lived up to the hype a little bit. And yeah, I don't know if I can take him over Pulisic just because of how good he's been for AC Milan this season. I think Kubo got a little unlucky here because I think if we were putting him against someone like Gio Reyna, I definitely would have taken Kubo. But I'm still going to pick Pulisic here. I think he's been playing for a bigger club in a very comparable league, but he's been doing it better in the Champions League and hopefully in the Europa League as well in the second half of the season. So I'm going to take Captain America, but Kubo's a very, very good player.
Yeah, I will say that I will show this to my Japanese friends that I very strategically put Kubo against Pulisic to not put him against Gio Reyna, I would have to pick Kubo in that case. Whereas in this one, I'll pick Pulisic as well. But as I said, Kubo would probably take the spot for anyone else in our front four, front three. But I stacked him against Pulisic, so it is what it is. Going on to the 10, I put Kamada against Gio Reyna. Again, Gio's always injured, but we picked the very, very best 11. I think he would be our starting 10. And him against Kamada, who's at Lazio now. Who would you take, Braden?
I'm actually going to take Daichi Kamada here because the season that Reyna has been having has been very, very disappointing. Now, you can blame Terzic, you can blame Reyna. I think it's pretty shared, the blame. I think there's things that both parties could do better to handle the situation. It looks like Reina might even be leaving Dortmund soon, which could be better for his development. But we saw how good Kamada was in the same league in the Bundesliga with Frankfurt, one of their most crucial players in that Europa League run that they had a couple years ago. And I think for Lazio, he's been all right this season. So I'm going to take him. The important thing is he's actually getting minutes, a lot more minutes than Reina is. And in, like I said, a very comparable league. I think after the Prem, the La Liga, Serie A, Bundesliga, all three of them are very, very similar in terms of quality. So I'm going to take Kamada here.
Yeah, honestly, I would have to pick Daichi Kamada too. We've seen. I think this is an easy one to compare. And Gio's the arguments for Gio would be a little bit. They wouldn't really be factual because it's all about potential. We look at what they have done in the league. I think Kamada he's one of the big reasons why Frankfurt are not at the level that they were, I believe. And at Lazio, I'll give him a little bit of a pass. Honestly, the club's a bit of a mess, but he's still been doing all right there. And I think he's such a good player, so underrated. It's incredible. If Kamada was called Caminho or something like that from Brazil, if it was Davi Caminho, he would be a player that's worth 80 million or something. I think he's a really good player. Now to the other wing, the wing depth is really tough for me. I put Weah just based on what I think Greg would do here, and he's a good player, and our fan base seems to think that he's undeniably the starter at the moment, although I think that position is up for grabs in the future. It's definitely one of the wing depth is we're really low on that. But I put him against Mitoma. Tough one for the US, but who would you take, Braden?
I think until Luka Kolyosho commits, we have to keep putting Weah in the best 11, as unfortunate as it may be. It's not like he's a bad player or anything, very consistent, but very mid, in all honesty. I don't think he's going to get us too far. I'm hoping we can have a more exciting player in the near future, but Mitoma has to be the pick here. I think he's a contender for the best player in this entire combined 11 between Americans and Japanese players. I think I might even take him over Pulisic. At this point, I mean, he performed better in the Prem, so you have to at that point, despite the situation that Chelsea was going at. I don't know if Mitoma would have failed at Chelsea, considering how many players have had their careers ruined there. He probably would have. So it's lucky that he didn't end up getting a big move. I think he's perfect at Brighton, and Weah is very stagnant, honestly, this season at Juve. He's a very rotational player. He starts some games, starts on the bench some others, and I don't think he's showed anything this season to warrant a spot, even a consideration over Kaoru Mitoma.
At least he has that one banger he just scored, so it's nice to see. But then again, he follows that up with a very coward performance, I'll say it as it is, just passing sideways, backwards. I think a lot of that is based on the uncertainty of where he's going to play, where he's been playing, where he's been all over the place. He's a good player. I feel like if he had, as you mentioned, Mitoma's stay at Brighton, I think it would have been good for Weah not to necessarily stay because he was just playing out of position as well, but go to a club. I think it was maybe a step too big, really, because I would like to see him develop as a winger at a smaller club, at a fringe club, really, like Mitoma has done at Brighton. What a project they have. I have to take Mitoma. There's no way. And as you said, you put him against Pulisic. I'll take Pulisic just based on feelings, because as a player, Mitoma is such a good player. I have to pick him. Now, going on to the forward striking position, this is where I think the U.S. has a little bit of an edge lately, but this might be biased as well because Japan, again, I put out a few players here. There would be two options. They seem to be going with either Ueda, who's a younger player, a younger striker, or Minamino. Minamino has started in the last couple of games, so I'll put Minamino. He's a very good name there. It's more of a false nine, especially with the space that they have at the wings, and usually they do overlapping, and he's a false nine. So I'll put Minamino against, in my opinion, Ricardo Pepi. I put him on my starting 11, but I'll throw Balogun out there if you want to put him. Who would you start on an ideal 11, Braden?
I would actually agree with Pepe over Balogun, but regardless of who you want to pick or your preferences, I think most USMNT fans would still pick Balogun for now. But I think either way, we still beat Japan here. They have a lot of options. Minamino is a pretty good player for Monaco. You could argue, I think he's outperformed Balogun for Monaco. But as a striker, I don't think that's where he shines. I think he's more of a winger, maybe a 10. It's not his traditional position, and I still think Pepe beats out both of them. So we do have an edge here, but there's a lot of players, honestly, for both sides. It's a very deep position for both teams. So there's a lot of players, even going down to the third, fourth choice options that could be considered here.
Yeah, and talking about options, I'm going to list out some of the star players that would be on the bench. In this case, you just mentioned Ueda. He's been doing pretty well for Japan, so that's why he gets some starts here and there. But I agree with you. I'll start Pepe over anyone here, and I think that Minamino for Japan, he plays as a false nine, and it works for them because it's a very work ethic based. They work so hard. The work rate is insane, really, for Japanese players. And him dropping more as a 10, so they really don't have a 9 if they had one. They have tried Maeda there. They tried it during the World Cup. But we know as USMNT fans how Celtic players fare on the international level, really. And I'll just list out some of the players that I left out. I know that some of my Japanese friends will be a little bit unhappy that I left Keito Nakamura, who seems to be a star in Japan now. He's a really good player, really good young winger. Ritsu Doan, who had a memorable World Cup. Asano as well. What a moment he had in the World Cup. For our side, I listed really. Oh, and also Ito. Ito's the young sung hero in Japan. Everybody loves him. The dude looks like he's 20 years old, but he's already 30. And a really good player. All of these Japanese players look really young. And then on our side, really, I don't, at that caliber, really, I just put Balogun/Pepe, whoever you're going to bench there. We have some other players like Brendan Eriksson, who has had a good career in Europe. Some people might disagree, but he has a name still and performs at a good level. I put Scally there. He is in the same bracket as I believe. But honestly, I feel like they have a lot more coming from the bench than we do, at least on the attacking side. Would you agree with that, Braden?
I think their winger depth is very, very good. I think for the midfield, you could throw in now Tillman, Yunus Musa, that mix, maybe even some of our younger sixes like Johnny Cardoso, Leonard Maloney, Tanner Tessman. But yeah, at the back, I don't think there's many depth players for either side. And as you get forward, the quality increases and increases in the starting 11, and even on the bench. There's so many good players that Japan have to use us off the bench, and I think that's why they were able to do so well against some of the bigger teams in the World Cup, because as the defenders got tired, they could bring on players like Ritsu Don and who could be really effective for them.
Yeah, I think honestly this is a really good comparison in my opinion. Now just going into our final considerations, I think that Japan's maybe 5-10 years ahead of us. I believe in producing some. I truly think so, especially in the coaching side. That's the main thing. I think in their league, you see a lot of good Japanese coaches. They have been able to do themselves justice over the years with Japanese coaches. I don't think essentially as players, player by player, they're too far ahead of us. But they seem to have a very cohesive way of playing that they have installed in the federation. It's been their plan ever since Zico, the Brazilian former player, was there. They have made up the academy and even the high school structure in a way to play the Japanese way, really. And they have that identity. I feel like it's a lot easier for players to have chemistry in the national level because of the coaching that they see. And their league, it's really good. It's a really good league. I think the J League is similar to the MLS level, really. I would say maybe a little bit higher. And also because the continental competitions are far more difficult than the CONCA champions that we have. So I think they've benefited on the growth of their domestic product, as well as on the focus to have Japanese coaches. That's something that even all the way back in 1998, Japan installed as a goal to have Japanese coaches, really. And I think that's one side that they definitely overtake us on. I think that American coaches aren't good. I don't think they're good at any level, really. Not to say that every single one is bad, but that's one thing that holds us back. And I think that ultimately we are behind them for that reason. What are your final takes, Braden?
I definitely agree with that. I think the number of good American coaches you could probably count on one hand. There are a decent number of good coaches in MLS, but the problem is they're all foreign. You rarely ever see any good American coaches that stay in MLS. There's been one or two, maybe, that you could consider, but I think Japan does a lot better of that and their development as well. Some clips have emerged on Twitter recently at their high school level, and it's so far above our high school or probably even our college level. It's insane how good the talent there is. And yeah, I think they're on a similar trajectory to us, being an outsider nation from a slept-on or a weaker confederation that's trying to push their way up into the top 10 and become a true footballing powerhouse. But like you said, I think they are 5 to 10 years ahead of us. Maybe not 10, because I think that's a little harsh on the development that we have here, but probably 3 to 5 years ahead of us. And they seem to be going forward at a higher trajectory than we are, honestly. We're both moving in the same path. They seem to be moving a lot quicker than we do. So, I mean, I think it's a very real possibility they could be contending for a World Cup within the next 1 to 2 installations.
Yeah, I think just to touch on one last thing, a while back, Eric Wynalda put out an article on how high school soccer should be given a lot more of an attention. And we see that in Japan, one of the reasons why high school soccer is given so much focus is it's public schools. You don't have to pay to play, and that's something that really helps. And the sense of identity that we've mentioned and Eric Wynalda mentioned in the past of representing your local high school in Japan, that's taken really seriously. They take that with a lot of pride, and it worked out well for them. So maybe that's a route that we could take in order to fight pay to play, really. But it's hard, honestly. Culturally, I feel like they're a lot more ready for soccer than the U.S. is. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Thank you. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment. We really enjoy doing these, and leave also a comment on which country you want us to compare the U.S. against next. It'd be nice to see us comparing against some of these fringe countries. I think that in the past we've done some very biased takes, but we'll leave out in the link as well the links for those comparisons. But thank you, Braden. We'll see you guys next time.